We'll get back to this. Right now, David is focused on Rachel. This book is the closest we get to the series admitting that the Animorphs may have fucked up how they handled David. He accused the Animorphs of being unfair to him, though the only example cited is Rachel thrusting a fork into his ear and threatening his family, which isn't nice, but this was after the switch had been flipped that turned David from a confused kid without all the information to evil murderer dumping bodies down elevator shafts. No mention on how they rushed him into conflict, how they didn't even try to make him comfortable, how there was just no empathy from anyone. No, it was the fork in the ear that did it. And now, he's come to pay Rachel back. David reveals Cassie, also trapped in the box, only this one doesn't have air holes. Rachel has to morph rat and stay in that morph for over 2 hours, or Cassie will suffocate to death. Rachel does so, but while David sits on her box, boasting and making grand gestures of his rise in power and a suggestion that Rachel might like to tag along, she suddenly realized that none of this makes any fucking sense. "Everything I told you is true," David said quickly. "I escaped from the island. I have a plan to rule the world. Rats are not sentient creatures," I interrupted. "They don't take orders. They don't organize. They can't be rallied like troops. And they don't attack people on command." David chittered and lay on his belly. "You might be a rat with human intelligence, but that doesn't make you Dr. Doolittle. You can talk to me and you can talk to your punks, but you can't talk to other rats." "You don't know what you're saying. You don't know anything," David cried. "Shut up, shut up!" "Which means that what happened outside the barn couldn't have happened," I went on, my brain whirring. "And what you said happened on the island, you're building a loyal following, couldn't have happened. Which means that this, right now, can't be happening either." I looked over at Cassie. She was smiling. And then Cassie wasn't Cassie. She became a creature we had encountered before. The Drode. "Ha-ha! Surprise, mofos! This ain't a David story. This is a cosmic power story. Specifically, a Crayak and Drode story. Effectively, this is just another layer of Dream. David is there, and I think Abbott and Costello are also there, but David's not in charge of this, and his cartoon plot of raising a rat army and spreading the plague across the world was a bunch of bull. As much as he wants it, this story isn't even really about David getting revenge, but that of the Drode following up on his comment from all the way back in number 27, The Exposed, where he expressed that Rachel had potential. Crayak appears, and he's pretty chatty this time, mostly to match up with his appearance in the Animorphs Chronicles. The Crayak says he wants to see Rachel reach that potential, and he put David as an obstacle in front of her to test her willingness to do whatever it is necessary to win. Crayak magically whisked Rachel out of the box and back to her human form, then injects that form with super juice, turning her into a giant woman with Super Saiyan strength and Lady Deathstriker finger claws. She describes herself in mechanical terms, which has led to a lot of people thinking she's supposed to be some kind of cyborg monster, and thus the character art here is inaccurate. Guys, I believe this is called a metaphor, often confused with a simile. This juiced-up version is dubbed Super Rachel, and her first act as Super Rachel is to grab the Drode and tear him to pieces. The Drode finds this amusing and just puts himself back together like he's Daffy Duck. What seems to be happening after this point is that there are two parallel realities, one where Super Rachel is discussing things with the Crayak, and another where Rachel is still in Ratmorph, fighting and losing to David on a rat-on-rat fight. David's been training in karate, you see. Oh, I'm sorry. Being powerless versus ultimate power. Helplessness versus agency. We can talk about how Rachel's character changed over time, how she became more bloodthirsty and a rageaholic, and yes, these aspects of her characters were ramped up to extreme levels without warning. But this desire, one to have control over her life and be able to solve all the problems in her way, that goes all the way back to number 7, The Stranger. This book actually mirrors that one in some interesting ways. Both books deal with a cosmic power presenting Rachel with a choice, one where she fights and loses, and another where she's gifted something that will save her and her friends. This choice is a false one, but in different ways. The Elemist had no intention of saving the Animorphs, and the Crayak has no intentions of leaving without Rachel accepting his gift. Wait, Crayak's the bad guy, right? At least he doesn't lie like the Elemist did. The Crayak is offering Rachel the power to defeat the Yeerks once and for all, and all he asks is that she kill Jake. Yeah, he's still bitter about Jake defeating the Howlers, and seeing Jake get his brains blown out on the Delaware River just didn't scratch that itch. Crayak rationalizes this with a needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few spiel, and Rachel looks at her what would Cassie do bracelet. Good and bad are simple for Cassie, Crayak said. Yes. Cassie always knew right from wrong. So what is she telling you to do? It asked. I didn't know. Would Cassie sacrifice herself to save the entire planet? Yes, without a second thought. Would she sacrifice Jake? I didn't know. Oh, man. As we'll find out a few books from now, Cassie wouldn't sacrifice a mealworm to save Earth. Well, Crayak assumes that Rachel just needs to take these new powers out for a test drive, so he teleports her into a giant stone arena, and then... Crayak nodded, and the droid threw something out into the field. It was a ball. The ball hit the ground, bounced slightly, and rolled toward my feet. I bent to pick it up, and reared back when the ball exploded into matter. I found myself eye to eye with Visser 1's Andalite stock eyes. I'm sorry, did the droid just release Visser 1 from a Pokeball? That is just what happened, right? Kay Applegate just wrote a Pokeball into the story. Well, Visser 1 is a more convincing Pokemon than Vanillish. He's very confused by all of this. Why was the little lizard man force-feeding me all those rare candies? So basically, Crayak forces Super Rachel and Visser 1 to fight, while he, the droid, and David sit up in the bleachers like they're the gods of Ragnarok. Entertain us! Entertain us! Again, it's impossible to tell what's real and what's not. Is Visser 1 really here? No clue. Their fight includes morphing into several different monsters. Visser 1 morphs the Blob, Super Rachel morphs a piranha plant, but interestingly enough, they morph from one monster to the next without morphing back to their default forms. The Crayak has changed the rules, and these two combatants are playing by those rules even though they didn't know they'd been changed. It's a tough fight, but eventually Rachel gets Visser 1 on the ropes and pleading for his life. It's then that Rachel realizes what will happen if she takes the Crayak's offer, that she'll be feared and monstrous, a living demon hated by everyone no matter how many bad guys she destroyed. She may not be able to save the world, but she still wishes to be one of the good guys, even if it means she won't matter in the big picture. Though she may still ask if she matters to the next cosmic entity she comes across. Rachel refuses the Crayak's offer one final time, so Crayak returns her to the other reality, as a rat with David, minutes before her time is up and she's trapped forever. Crayak and the droid leave. Only a few minutes left, and then... Okay, Rachel, what's stopping you from demorphing? Crayak is gone, David can't do anything. You could just demorph and stop the ticking clock. Instead, Rachel gets the attention of Laurel and Hardy, who I guess were actually real, and tells them, hey, I have rat powers too. You let me go and I can lead you to all that money David stole. Money which was more or less proven not to exist when Rachel debunked David's rat army plan. Well, these guys are big enough idiots that they do just that. They open the box, Rachel demorphs, and then morphs Grizzly Bear and scares away Veruda and Capulina. What? Veruda and Mexican comedian? Oh, get some culture. Rachel breaks Cassie out of her box. I guess she was also there for real, except when she was the droid. I don't know. David runs off with some pipes, and Rachel starts to go after him. Cassie put her hand on my massive arm. What are you going to do? I looked into Cassie's eyes. Did she want to know? Did she really want to know? No, she didn't. That's why I'd been so angry. Not just at Jake, at all of them. Because they had kept their hands clean. They had pretended they didn't know I'd done something extreme like threaten to kill David and his parents. And when David had confronted them with the truth, they'd made their disapproval known. Separated themselves from me, made it clear I was deranged and out of control, and so unlike them. And then Cassie had come up with a plan to trap David and Morph, but only I'd had the nerve to endure the 2 gut-wrenching hours of David's misery. Why hadn't I fought back? Defended myself against accusations, insinuations of craziness? Okay, I'd confronted Jake, but had anything really changed between us since then? Did he generally approve of my actions? No, only of their results. He needed my results. So why had I been carrying around all that guilt, all by myself? Why had I been shouldering so much of the pain? I looked at Cassie's face. It was a sweet face. It was wise, too, but still, I don't know, oddly innocent somehow. I'd been protecting her. Them. Jake, Cassie, Tobias, even Marco and Axe, helping to protect their innocence. Letting them see themselves as the good guys. It was a symbiotic relationship, or codependent, whatever. They needed me to be the bad guy, and I needed them to be the good guys. See, if they were good guys, and I was on their team, then that automatically made me a good guy too, even if I was different. At least that's what I'd been telling myself. Of course, it wasn't quite that simple. So Rachel follows David's trail until a pipe leads them out into an alley. It's there that David stops. He's done. There is nothing left for him now. So David turns to Rachel and calmly asks her to take one final thing from him. His life. He needs Rachel to kill him. The book ends with Rachel and David alone in that alley, Rachel crying like a child because she has no idea what to do. We never find out if she lets David live or die. Post-book follow-up. Probably the thing I've enjoyed most about this project is rereading a book I originally didn't enjoy back in the day, and then coming off the reread really liking it. Not that I think this book is super duper amazing perfect, but I was originally distressed by its weirdness and its bait and switch villains, and generally angry about Rachel's blood rage character that was very different from where the character had started. Since that original read, I've grown a greater appreciation of surrealism, symbolism, and overall weirdness. This kind of thing was an underutilized possibility for the cosmic storyline. Sure, the star hopping and time travel can be fun at times, but the elements in Crayak allow for this kind of symbolic alchemic storytelling, and it had been a shame for the series to not take advantage of that at least once. The only real comparison here is number 41, The Familiar, but that's more of an alternate universe book and doesn't have anything to do with the Elements or Crayak anyway. This book is a more unconventional narrative than the Elements Chronicles even, a book told from the perspective of an actual god. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, I agree, once the Ghostwriter era started, Rachel hadn't always been consistent with her pre-Ghostwriter portrayal. She's always been the best fighter, she's always enjoyed the rush of adrenaline, but number 32, The Separation, and number 37, The Weakness, really threw her into the deep end, making her a violent psychopath who wants a war on her terms. I think it would have been possible to get to that point for the character eventually, but it would probably require maybe 20 more books than the series has. But you know what? Love it or hate it, this is the Rachel we have now. And when you accept that, this book plays with that character wonderfully. The Crayak and the various dreams within dreams force her to face these aspects of herself in an isolated setting, with only her enemies to judge her. Rachel is presented as two dynamically different entities. There's Super Rachel, which represents her desires, and Rat Rachel, which represents her fears. And when thought of like that, Crayak's offer sounds that much more appealing. The David stuff is a little more disappointing. It teases that it might address the issues with the original David trilogy, call out the Animorphs and how they utterly botched it, but the book keeps a very narrow focus, only bringing up Rachel's late-game role in that story. A role that, again, only happened because it was Rachel's turn to narrate a book. I'm glad that David's evil plot turned out to be a red herring. It was much too Captain Planet for my taste, but once the Crayak is revealed, David is pretty much pushed aside until the amazing final scene in the alley. This is a great Crayak Returns book, but it's not so great as a David Returns book. A David Returns book needs to confront the entire team, and it needs to call out all of their sins, not just Rachel's. And finally, the biggest sin for this book is its place in the series. This is only a final arc book in that it's doing a lot of house cleaning, taking care of loose threads like David still being alive and the Crayak is interested in Rachel. That's okay, but the problem is that this is the last book to be solo narrated by Rachel, and it's neither a satisfying wrap-up to her character or a substantial part of the final arc. I know hindsight is 20/20, but it would have been a lot better if they had dropped that stupid second Hal Macron book and put this story in the number 42 slot. Hey, that would have made a neat double feature with number 41 The Familiar. Then write a fresh story for Rachel to go out on. Alas, nothing we can do about that now. If you've been dismissive of this book as I used to be, I would strongly suggest giving it another shot. It might just surprise you. I give number 48 The Return a 7